Leslie Caraher. This is Everything Speaks, and we're changing it up. We're going to move to shorter. 15 minutes is our goal. We're going to move to very specific recommendations. I've got so many questions from people. How do I do this? What would you do with that? What would you do about this? What do you think about that? What do you think about this? Okay, I'm going to answer all your questions. And I'm going to do it one topic at a time. And with video, people have asked for video. And I'm just going to focus on one thing at a time in any topic that circulates around communication. So communication and leadership, communication and values, communication, how to write, how to email, how to Slack, good PR, bad PR. I'm just going to respond to your questions because I've got a list of questions that people have come in from our listeners that are almost 2 pages now. It's like, why don't I just do what people are asking me to do? I don't know. Something I learned at Sega. When your customer tells you what to do it and they'll listen. So that's what we're going to do. So welcome to episode 1 of our new format in Everything Speaks. Everything Speaks, where we talk about how everything that you do and say speaks for you if you want it to or not. So here's what we're going to talk about today. I cannot believe how many articles I'm seeing about how terrible Gen Z is. They're lazy. They're not ready for work. I got to fire them. They don't have any sense of urgency. They don't wear what we need them to wear. They don't know how to, be in the workplace. It is like deja vu all over again. I think you probably know that I wrote a book called Millennials and Management. It was published 10 years ago. My first book was published 10 years ago, which was in reaction to when we at Double Forte hired millennials and almost deep sixed the company because we didn't understand who was coming into our workforce and we didn't create the environment that let them shine. And by creating that environment that let them shine actually helped everybody else shine too. And here we are 10 years later, new generation, Gen Z, and now millennials are complaining about Gen Z as much as Gen X and boomers are. And as if we had learned nothing. So I will link it in the show notes, but there was a story in Fortune that bosses are firing Gen Z grads just months after hiring them. Here's what they say needs to change. Well, you know what? Who needs to change? They need to change. Because every generation complains about the next generation. And I'm going to give you an example of this. You may have heard me read this before, but I'm going to ask you this question. Who said this? The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love chatter in place of exercise. Children are now tyrants, not the servants of their households. They no longer rise when elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before company, gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, oh my gosh, and tyrannize their teachers. Plato said this as Socrates. And when was that? He lived 470 to 399 BC. That'd be for Christ, before Christ. This is not a new phenomena. Every generation complains about the next generation, and they don't meet their standards. And the reason they don't meet their standards is because things change. Norms change. They listen to their parents complaining about being complained about. I mean, it's not rocket science. I'm just saying. So it may be true that Gen Z, particularly coming out of college right now, and you have to think about all they've been through in the last 5, 6, 7 years, they may not be prepared for work, but that is not necessarily all of their fault or their problem to deal with. It is yours. It is not a preparation question. It is a communication question. Because we have to learn how to communicate with, meaning be in dialogue with, have the same language with the people who we are working with, right? So let's talk about this Gen Z problem. And I am using the air quotes, people, a little more. So first of all, you need to know that I really don't like lumping people together in a generational defined maxims. It is not. It is impossible that 60 million people are all lazy, are all without initiative, that don't know how to. I mean, it's impossible. Just like 10 years ago, or it's now 12 years ago when I was researching for my company, I did not believe that all millennials were entitled. They all, it's impossible. It's statistically, empirically impossible that there 80 million people are the same. However, I'm very comfortable saying, like, a new generation, same old flawed blame game. Very, very comfortable saying that. When I published my first book, Millennials in Management, what you need to know is that I hated that title. I hated the title because of that issue. All millennials are not the same. However, they hated my format. My format in that book what is a chapter, and at the end of every chapter deals with a topic. The end of every chapter is do's and don'ts for leaders and managers, and then do's and don'ts for the team. Because what is worse than having a leadership team, a management team, go off to some retreat, get some leadership training, come back with a whole new vocabulary that the people that you're working with have no clue what you're talking about, and then start to impose it. I mean, it just creates chaos, chaos, chaos. So the compromise I made with my publisher at the time was, I will take the title they like, Millennials in Management, and I will get to do my format that I like, because it's about more than one audience. You cannot just talk to one audience when you're talking about communication, because communication requires listening, which requires the other person. Just saying. They were right about the title. I was right about the format, because sold a lot of books. It was a bestseller at the time. Still, I just got a royalty check. It's still selling, still valuable. And I was right about the format, because you can't just talk to people. You have to talk with people. And co-creation is where we're all at. All right. Another thing. The reason I published that book was because actually so many clients asked me to publish the book. Because I almost deep sixed my company because I didn't understand how to incorporate millennials into our workforce. And it's a long story, which I'm happy to tell about in another time, but that could take more than 15 minutes. And I don't got more than 15 minutes. We're also at a time where I think companies feel like the pendulum has swung back. We don't have to keep all these people. They can go away. We have return to office. That's a whole nother topic. And in the constant sort of ebb and flow back and forth between employees have the power, employers have the power, we may be in a moment in time where employers feel they have more power. I don't think that's true. Unemployment is historically low. Bottom line, though, if you don't have Gen Z in your company, you don't get a future in your company. That's how it works. You need to have the younger generation so that you have a long-term runway for your organization. Also, not rocket science, but who might have known? So let's talk about these complaints. These complaints about not being prepared for work basically could be almost cut and pasted with sort of a Mad Libs, replacing of a noun with millennials a decade ago, frankly. And what these criticisms overlook is that the responsibility of workplace readiness does not just fall on the employee. It doesn't fall on colleges either. Colleges are trade schools. Even in a trade school, you get prepared for what does a lineman do? What does a welder do? What happens on the cook line? All these kind of things. In college, you don't get prepared for this. Internships might prepare you for this. Maybe. Depends on the organization. But it's actually not right now. I don't know of a college that's their job. That is not their job. They have career services. If kids go to that, that's awesome. Who knows if they're right or not? It's sort of iffy, right? So it is the team leader's job. It's the manager's job. It's the coach's job, regardless of generation, to help their teams understand expectation, understand the norms, understand the unique demands of their roles, of their organizations, of their teams, of their companies, of their industry. How are they going to know? Don't assume they know, because they don't. They don't. And you have to start this setting expectations, making sure people understand, being repetitive. See what I did there? From the first day, and not starting 6 months after the new employee's been there and regularly disappointed you across all the different axes of things that you're worried about. No. Day one, setting expectations. Maybe day zero, setting expectations. So being clear starts around expectations for whoever comes into your organization, regardless of generation, because maybe you have somebody who's a Gen Z or a Gen X or a millennial or a boomer, whoever comes from a different organization, and the definition of urgency is different in your organization than their organization. Or the definition of workplace casual means sneakers in one organization and means bare feet in the other organization. You have to define your terms for your business and your culture. This is the nut of communication. If you all don't mean the same thing when you say the same word, you're not communicating. And that's not on the employee. It's got to start with the leaders. Making sure that your employees know to ask questions and to question and to say, does this mean that, or does this mean that? That's something you have to set up early too. Explain what you expect from your employees as they come into the organization, and then you're much less likely to be disappointed by their performance or lack thereof later on. So I've given workshops all over the country on this topic on intergenerational communication in the workplace. And in general, they all boil down the same way. Truly. Big groups, small groups, groups in the South, groups in the Northeast, group in the Southwest. I mean, I've been all over the country on this topic. And in the end, if we have to boil it down to 2 or 3 things, we can boil it down to these. One, boils down to 1, how do you set expectations? Explicitly detailing your expectations. I'll give you an example in a second. B, or 2, how do you cultivate dynamic feedback loops so that you're getting feedback, you're listening, you're adapting, you're going back and forth? Because it is nothing static. Nothing is static. Communication is ongoing dialogue. And 3, understanding that everyone can and should, I don't like using that word, you've heard me say that before, but should help evolve a workplace culture to stay relevant, because a relevant workplace 10 years ago is not a relevant workplace today. We can have a whole nother conversation about return to work. That's a different thing. So let's just talk today about setting expectations explicitly. So what might seem obvious to a boomer, an X, or a millennial who's been in the workforce for 1, 2, 3, 4 decades, so they have a lot of experience under their belt, is mostly likely unfamiliar to a 20-year-old fresh out of college. One of the biggest mistakes managers make is assuming that the basic norms that you have are universally understood. We all assume, oh, give it to me later means whatever it means for you. Well, later could mean tomorrow, next week, and a year. It's not defined, right? They aren't. The norms are not. They shift from organization to organization. They shift from person to person. They shift from culture to culture. They shift from background to background. So you have to establish, communicate your norms from the beginning, so everyone's on the same page. And so the same way you would onboard someone to a specific task or tool that you're training on, you need to onboard people onto your workplace norms and how it operates. This includes everything from how to communicate with colleagues and managers to what constitutes professionalism in terms of dress or language, or what not to put in the microwave, to the expectations around meeting deadlines. You cannot assume they know, because they don't. And if you're going to do one thing to improve clarity with everybody in your team, but specifically your youngest employees, start defining deadlines with specificity. Use day, hour, time zone, and format when you give a deadline. So let's think about it this way. The number one deadline in high school and college is 11:59 p.m. That is the same day in the 24, I guess it would be 23:59 in the 24-hour calendar or time in the clock. So if you say Tuesday is your deadline, don't be surprised if you receive the work at 11:59 p.m. Tuesday in whatever time zone that person lives in. If you meant Tuesday work day, when do you end? Do you end at 3? Do you end at 5? Do you end at 6? Do you end at 8? When do you end? You have to say so. Please send me the document in Word or as a Google link or whatever in SharePoint at or by is better than at, by 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Tuesday, October 8th, period. So now I know what time zone, I know what time, I know what format, I know what day. Tuesday, October 8th, in a Google link by 3 p.m. in Central Time Zone. So it seems like it's excessive. It is not. I'm telling you now, it's not excessive. It's your job. That specificity will just drive so much clarity and understanding that can't be misunderstood. Later can be misunderstood. End of day could be misunderstood. Close of business can be understood. When you get to it can be misunderstood. All those things can be misunderstood. Your job in communication is to drive clarity, specificity. Don't let your instruction let your people be wrong. And you can avoid this by driving clarity with detail into your expectations. So that's just it. One example of this. If we all would do this, our Gen Z compadres would be doing so much better. We'd be doing so much better. And if you take this model against all the things that are pissing you off and all the things that are disappointing you from your Gen Z colleagues, go across the board and start driving into specificity, you are going to be so much happier. And you won't have to fire as many people as you think you have to fire today. All right, so what speaks? Specificity. What speaks? Not absolute clarity in what you're saying. So there is no room for misunderstanding. That's your job. That's everybody's job, to be specific so that what you say is what is heard and what is mutually understood in communication. All right. I think I got that under 15 minutes. Until next time, I'm Lee Kerr. Have a great day.